Hello and welcome to the Chicago Humanities Festival and today's program, Photography and Community. My name is Philip Bahar and I'm the Executive Director of the festival. You can learn more about our upcoming events at chicagohumanities.org. And while you're there, if you'd like to make a donation or become a member, it would be greatly appreciated and will enable us to bring our programs to life throughout the year. I want to thank our captioner for making tonight's event more accessible. All of our digital events have closed captioning that can be controlled through YouTube. Today's program is developed in collaboration with the Smart Museum of Art at the University of Chicago as part of their multi-exhibition and program series toward common cause, art, social change, and the MacArthur Fellows Program at 40. Thank you to all our colleagues at the Smart Museum for their partnership and incredible work. And thank you to the David C. and Sarajean Ruttenberg Arts Foundation for generously underwriting the festival's photography programs this fall. If you have any questions for our panelists during the session, please share them in the YouTube chat and we'll get to as many as we can. Unfortunately, Deborah Willis is unable to join us this evening due to technical difficulties out east driven by weather. So please help me in welcoming tonight's additional presenters, all of whom are ready to share their thoughts about photography and their power and community with you. The panelists include the photographer Wendy Ewald, documentary filmmaker Louis Massiah, and the artist Carlos Javier Ortiz. With that, enjoy the program and the artists you're about to hear from, and thank you for joining
us. Thank you for the introduction. Wendy, Louis, it's a real pleasure to be here with you all. Sorry we're missing Deborah. And I think I'll start with my slides, really talking about where my work starts from. It really, to me, Anthony, do you mind putting up the first slide, please? My work for me really starts with the place where I come from, right? Which is community. Black and brown communities. I grew up in Chicago. I was born in Puerto Rico. I was raised in Chicago. And I was raised at a time in the 80s, early 80s to like the mid 90s where I was influenced by street culture, mostly because I was, you didn't really have a TV and you were hanging out on the streets and you were seeing what life really like. The stage that took place was in your porch outside of the house. And so the neighborhood I came to was Black, Puerto Rican, Filipino. It was the first LGBTQ community that was like moving into the neighborhood and living there amongst everybody else. And that was kind of like the beginning of the influence that I had. And also, televisions. I didn't have my first television, my first color television until my grandfather got us one. And that was later on in life. But I was always watching a lot of black and white imaging. And I think that kind of stuck in my brain. It kind of made me think about composition and the movement of body language and people, and it really made me think about the way we compose ourselves. So I was influenced by a lot of great black and white television back in the day. Next slide, please. And when I got, I guess, old enough to really think about my artistic practice, which started with photography. It actually started with painting in high school, but I couldn't paint. So I found photography and it was really easy to communicate. And then it was real difficult to master. And from photography, it went on to film. I always wanted to do film, but I couldn't afford to buy any film. So I stuck to the still image because cinema was so expensive in college. And so I stuck to the still image and I just really learned how to take pictures. I worked at the Chicago Defender. And then later on in life, I worked at Ebony magazine. And I always worked in Black and Brown communities. So for a long time, I lived in Philadelphia for a while too, and then I came back from Philly with a thought of, I saw a lot of gun violence happening in Chicago and as well as in Philadelphia, and I really wanted to address it. And the way I approached it in the way of talking to families and approaching it in the way of the aftermath of violence, like what happens to a community. It's not just the gun violence, but what happens to a community? How do they build? How do they stick together? And I wanted to show that joy, right, within Black and Brown communities, that joy of life, how people celebrate, how people come together. Next slide, please. And so, again, through photography, through the 35 millimeter format, changing. I tried everything. I tried every single format, but I found Polaroid to be a way of really communicating with people, because I can give them an image, and I can also, keep a negative, take a portrait. So I use this format a lot. And next slide. And at the same time as I was using that format, I started exploring filmmaking when filmmaking became basically inexpensive to be able to make a film. And you always have this ambition of making a feature film, but I settled for shorts, making shorts, which is just as good. And I never really thought about putting my work into film festivals. And then I was approached by a filmmaker who encouraged me to put my work into film festivals, and I started doing that, and then it just opened up a whole different world. This is a film, 1,000 Midnights. It's influenced by family. It's influenced by the death of Emmett Till, but also the death of young people in Chicago and other cities in the United States. And then next slide. And so when I started project, it's kind of started through photography, but then it evolved to film, and it evolved to like ephemera that I found that was part of the work. And one thing led to the next, and it just became a document from the still image to the moving image to everything in between, the evidence of these things taking place in our lifetime. And then also coming back, right? The celebration of Emmett Till's life and death, and how for such a long time, actually, this story of Emmett Till kind of went away, and now it's taking place back. People are starting, to really talk about the death of Emmett Till. But in Chicago, it was always something in the background. It was something, I interviewed people, aunt who went to the funeral, and she talked about how hot the line was, how long the line was, how hot the day was, how her watch just kind of stuck to her hand and left a tan mark, and then she saw his face, in this casket. And then there's family members of Emmett Till who are still alive in Chicago. So the story is very close to home, even though this took place in Mississippi. So I encourage people to think about storytelling from home, from community, and then those stories sometimes have a bigger portal to other worlds, in other places, and they're not really far away from each other. Next slide. And so this is how I take my work from conception of photography to film, then to the exhibition, but also into the print media and into film festivals. Next slide, please. This is a show I had at MOCP with there's 3 exhibitions, Dawu Bay, David Chalio. It was like a year and a half ago. And yeah, and so that's how my work really takes place. It just starts through one idea, one thing, and then it leads to another thing and another thing. That's my timer. So I'm gonna pass the torch to the next presenter.
Well, I can go, I guess. Well, I started doing this type of work in the community. Actually, it was by accident, I guess, in a way, when I was in high school, and it was the summer after and I was in Detroit, the summer after the '67 uprising, and I volunteered at a settlement house, and which was an incredible place to be able to be around at that time, because it was sort of the center of the movement for young people, and people also were being paid to go to the settlement house in order to prevent another riot from happening. And so it was an incredible education for me to be in the middle of that. And I wasn't living in that community, but I, drove my, car, old car down there. And so that stuck with me for forever. I realized that, maybe that wasn't the time that I should have been there. And I was very grateful that I was there. So that started, then all through college, I worked on 2 different First Nations communities in Canada. And at that point, I realized that I really wanted to, and wanted to work with young people taking photographs. So I got Polaroid, gave me cameras and film. And this was 1969. And, it was really pre so much in the Native American culture as far as being able to, see and talk about themselves. So, yeah, and I'm still working with that material from 1969, actually. And it has morphed into a lot of different things. I'm just, working on a piece of the show that's got 69 and then 39 years later, and then a project within that where people started taking the pictures from 69 all the way up, and then putting them, pictures in the community, and putting them on their site and combining them. And so that's kind of like something that has gone through everything. And with this, why I'm in Chicago, or I'm virtually in Chicago, is as part of the Common Cause exhibition and project. And I, a few years ago, started working a lot with immigrant communities in this country. Well, first I started in the UK, and then in this country. And so in here, and I had to do it virtually because I don't live in Chicago. So there's all that that's so, for me, is so difficult not to have a personal connection, to be in the same place. Anyway, so I ended up working with Centro Romero, and that has a, is a legal, for those that don't know, it's a legal aid organization that's multifaceted and has a youth program. And so I was working with the young people to make photographs, to write, to draw, to explore their both their parents' journeys to where they are now, and their own. And then also, since the pandemic started, well, in the beginning of the project, so then the pandemic became a subject of their work. Then I was able to come to Chicago and then was working with them, making portraits with them, and also making collages with them of their photographs. So first slide. So the first one is with one of the young women, Adriana, whose family came, all of these kids, their families or they themselves came from Mexico, either Michoacan or Guerrero. And Adriana's mother had her kids in the US, but she was part of a big family of 9 kids, and they came to the US one by one, and she was the youngest. So she came by herself at age 15, and in a group, but with nobody she knew. And Adriana really explored her mother's journey, what her mother is doing now, and how much respect she has for her struggle. No. I asked them to make maps of the journeys, and then I combined those with photographs that we did this together, photographs that they made. And then eventually when I got back to Chicago, I was able to make a studio, and in part of an extension of Centro Romero, which is now, fortunately, we hope is going to become a gallery and a part of Centro, but also be part of that community ongoing, so that there'll be a gallery that's dedicated to the subject of immigration.
Are these new images that you're showing?
Yeah, it's all brand new, and it's at Weinberg Newton right now.
Oh wow! Look, here we go.
There we go! Yay! Maybe
they'll come up. They'll come up. I promise. They'll come up.
Anyway, then I made a studio with lots of help from other people, and it was really important to me to be able to use an incredibly sharp camera. So I had never used it before, but it's amazing. And that if you haven't, try it. If you can, it's amazing, because what you can get is you can really look into somebody's eyes in a way that I've never felt before. The person you're photographing.
What camera are you using?
It's a Fuji GFX.
Oh yeah.
100. I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it's not that heavy, or it is technically for me, since I'm a Luddite, but it's not hard to use, and you can focus it so that it will focus only on the eyes, for example. So you have all this, you can work fast, and anyway. So, because it was very hard for me. I don't know about you, Carlos, moving out of black and white. I did not want to leave black and white, and I used that Polaroid film.
I've been so to me, like, I've been using color forever, but when the digital and the color came together, I couldn't work it. Now I think things have changed where you can kind of assimilate the digital color to the color negative, but the color negative or the slide film, I mean, it's just magical, right? So it was very hard. Digital has come a long way where you can get there. So I scratched that and I went back to what I was kind of saying is like thought about the black and white television when I was a kid, where the color didn't distract anything. It was just a black and white image, and then you can tell a story in that format. But people think you can't shoot color, and we can shoot color. We see color. We live this life in color, but there's also that those two things is not something you can force, in any of the formats, in the moving image or in stills, So how do you feel about that, Louis?
Yeah.
Well,
how do you feel about that? Because you probably went from film, right? From shooting film on a 16 mil or an 8 mil, or 35 mil, to this other format of
well, actually, I didn't. My route is a little bit different in that I initially was interested in video. I mean, when before video was digital, before video had high resolution, I was, the artists and the people that it sort of brought me in were folks like Philip Mallory Jones, who's an artist, certainly Nam June Paik, Beryl Corot, a lot of folks that worked around Ellis Hazlitt. There was a program that Ellis Hazlitt created called Soul that really was pushing video in the late 60s and early 70s. So I really came into time-based media through video. Yes, I studied film and made films with 16 millimeter, but I really was interested in the aesthetics of video and how we take in video, the historic way that we sort of receive video. Video was a way of capturing actuality, whereas film was more distant. It was more abstracted and was more narrative. But and it's interesting. Deb Willis really is very much present. So first, I'm honored to be sort of sharing this screen with Wendy and Carlos and Deb, who is here in spirit. I mean, and really, Ellis Hazlitt was how I met Deb Willis back in the 1970s, I guess, and I think I really looked at video as a mode of communication, and the communication was not just what you recorded, but it was how it was received. And one of the first experiences that was transformative and has everything to do with the work I do now was sitting, watching video, not necessarily on TV, not watching film in a movie theater, but watching video in a small space where you can actually have conversations with people, so that video was an element in communication. So the communication begins with what you capture, but it is realized once you have the audience there. So that really is the root of it. And it was really in that context that I first met Deb Willis. I worked in television, and I worked in public television. I worked, first as a writer, something called a continuity writer, is something that doesn't even exist anymore, and worked on TV series, the Eyes on the Prize, which is the history of the civil rights and Black freedom struggle. Made documentaries on folks, and still am actually. Doing that, but in addition to that, really wanted to make sure, and this goes back to how that experience, that transformative experience of watching video collectively with people was really looking at time-based media, not for something only for movie theaters, not something only for television, not something only for the internet screen, but something that can be experienced in community settings. And the authenticating audience is that audience that perceives, that gets it in community settings. And so that kind of led me to create a media arts center in Philadelphia, Scribe Video Center, as a place where people could come together to learn the craft of the technology of time-based media production and the craft of time-based media production, but also the way you construct and the craft of writing with video, basically, and how you can use video as a narrative form. And so a lot of the work of community, I say community and time-based media, not just community and photography for me, is really working with community groups and helping them really gain literacy with video making. I know this is a Chicago-based panel, even though we're all in different places. One of the pretty extraordinary institutions in Chicago is the National Public Housing Museum. And one of the projects that we've had in Philadelphia is this community oral history project, where we put 2 filmmakers with a community group for about 6 or 7 months, who create some sort of documentary about that place. And these documentaries are not meant for commercial success, and they're not meant for not as entertainment, or we hope they are entertaining and we hope that they attract people, but they're really meant as films of utility, films that maybe in showing that this neighborhood should not be bulldozed, it's, as a tool in fighting eminent domain, or maybe as a tool to work for more green space, or maybe as a neighborhood gets gentrified so that the incoming folks realize, no, this was not a wasteland. This was a land where people had lived for many, many generations. And part of being in this new neighborhood is having a respect for that neighborhood.
To work is around 600,000.
The Mantua community of West Philadelphia.
That I had to tell about my community and my people.
People are saying, I'm here, I'm alive, I exist.
I live up there. I live up there. I live up the street. I live right there. I live up there. I live up the street.
Homes was a community that the people shared and cared and enjoyed each other.
The idea of growing up here in Norris was, unbelievable for me. When I think about it, I think about the love, I think about the community, the family that we all had with one another.
These projects helped me to become the person that I am.
You must never say, we come from the ghetto. We come out of a community where people have just said to themselves that in spite of, we can do better.
Ain't no Norris community no more. They smoked us. They weeded us out. And Norris is over with. Look, we behind Norris. The windows is tricked up. We ain't got no steps. Of course, you should be back here. It's over. They got us. They won.
I would like to speak about in the beginning. I was brought here in 1943 at 3 months of age, and a wonderful Good Samaritan took me in and began to mold me, and took me and gave me love and compassion with no money. Not coming out of her womb, but I became a child. She took and rocked me in the bosom of her love and kindness. Then Norris Homes started to be built from 1948 all the way up to 1952. Because of the kindness of people in the neighborhood, the community helped out.
When I moved here, I really didn't like it because it was the projects. I hear people say, "Oh, I don't want to tell people I lived in the project." I loved living in the projects. I love growing up here. I love all the people that I met growing up here, and I don't have no regrets. And I'm still in love with all the people that I grew up with. They might not have a whole lot of money, but they got upbringing. What I experienced here was nothing but love, growth, living together as one. Growing up in the project was the reason why we wasn't poor. My father could afford to take care of us. He was a laborer, he didn't make a lot of money, and he had a lot of children, so project is what made us able to have the kind of life that we lived.
Uptown Theater was just right around the corner, and everybody in the community would go to the Uptown to see all the different shows, and we had a few entertainers that was right in the neighborhood. Brenda Payton from Brenda and Tabulations, they live right around the corner from me.
There are so many successful people come out of here.
We had Jamaluddin, a great bassist. We had Galen Baker that played for the Globetrotters. We have Morgan, who is a great artist, and there's so many others that grew up at Norris.
The temple was 3 blocks long.
And as the time went on, Temple started to expand little by little.
Everybody in the neighborhood used to say, "Oh, Temple University is going to get I mean, it was like always a warning sign that, you know, it was always like a part of a plan.
That was the time where they were beginning to start expansion of Temple. Miss Gwen Moses, Miss Jerry Williams, and Miss Dot Brown, they would be considered the activists for this community. By fighting Temple, they put a stop to them. That moment was a very proudful moment.
Temple used to always give us, you know, I made sure they gave us stuff.
I feel as though they could have helped out a great deal, more so than what they did. You know, as far as us coming up as children, they could have contributed to our education.
He ignored us. They ignored us like we didn't exist. You know, nobody never came with just the name Temple. Nobody never showed their face or nothing.
It's a whole lot of stuff we should have been getting. We wasn't getting. But I know the thing that we could have got and that we can get, we did get.
Maybe they could offer us some jobs.
I mean, it's just was all about Temple. Things didn't go their way. You know, they called the police. We're not doing anything. We're just in our own neighborhood. And, you know, cops come around here and they bother us. Why? With them coming around here just trying to take over things, it was not fair to us.
And they had talked about how they were going to tear down the houses. It was hard because I was there when that wrecking ball hit the top of the building, and that was like a punch in the stomach because I knew that was the real beginning of the end for us.
Wherever you are at in Philadelphia, you're going to see a change. Change is coming. Now, is anybody running anybody out? Well, that's up to the individual to say that.
If you have a situation where you have vitality, why not invest in that? You know, why push that aside? Why make that a situation where people who have invested their lives and invested community have to just, you know, pick up and move?
You can see where people are moving out and it's becoming a university community. It becomes hard because some of the people were very elderly people that have lived here for quite some years.
My mom been here for a long time. My mom was like the mother of the neighborhood. So and then you take her away from that. I mean, ain't no time. She died in a year.
She didn't know nobody for real from where she was at. Got lonely.
Well, right now where I'm at, not too happy with the neighborhood. I mean, there's trouble everywhere you go, but it's not safe for my child at all. She's in the house all the time. It's different from when she can come out the back door and we're here in the playground and she has her friends. It's like now all her friends are, everybody's scared and everybody's separated. So, you know, it's just right now we're just making it comfortable for where we at until we can return.
I'm really sorry they tearing it down. I feel like part of me is being torn away with it. And our children won't have no idea where we came from. And that's the hurt part.
They took away our community. This is where we were at. This is where everything, like we're out in the playground now and we had meetings, we had fun, we meet up with everybody. Everybody comes out, they sit around. We can't do that anymore.
I had just hoped and prayed that the people who lived here could, when they finished building the houses, could come back and live in the houses.
I mean, we still gonna be all right.
Yeah.
Because we built that family.
That's right.
We ain't friends and we family now. You know, there's some people in this project I didn't like. But they from here. So now when I see them now, it's like, wow, I'm running up to them, hug them and everything. Because we're family no matter what. I mean, everybody went through changes and all that, but now it's different now. We ain't about that anymore. We one now. That's all we is one. You from Norris, I'm from Norris, and we family.
It hurts because you hate to let go of those good memories and not gonna be able to ride by and remember the times and the places and the things that we did.
A lot of people still learn the lesson from this though. This is a lesson learned though. It's a lesson learned.
Okay.
Yeah, so the process of creating and also too, in terms of community media making, I think sometimes the thought is, oh, it's being done, it's community media, so we don't need to work with the best technology or we don't need to work with the best craft. But it really, but we all live in the same media universe, and so if a community person makes something, they're seeing Netflix, they're seeing you know Amazon, they're going to the multiplex. So really making sure that the language and the production values are something that they respect and that they can embrace. So that's so my take of community and photography or community and time-based moving images is letting the subjects have authorship, because that I learned so much more about how people paint themselves and describe themselves. I mean, I love your works, both of you. You do gorgeous works, and I learn from that. But I also love how people define themselves, and that to me is really gives me energy to actually. It gives all of us information really to make political change. If people in a community say, no, we're not, X, we're not hoodlums, but we are organizing because we are young men who are trying to create some sort of order in our lives. And if that's how they define themselves, then we begin to see them, the rest of us, those who are not in that community, get to understand things differently. So I really believe in participatory media where the subjects have authorship.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the time right now is, and also especially for the artists, for women, people of color, restructuring the narrative. I saw, like today, I saw Anita Hill. She just came out with a book, and for me, Anita Hill was this woman who, people call her crazy, but I saw her as like this brave woman who was just in front of, all these people, including the president of the United States at this point right now, Joe Biden, who told her story, and she restructured the narrative of abuse, and all this stuff didn't register, but I was like, wow, she's up there saying that, and this is years ago, and she's still fighting that fight. So I think more and more of that is taking place, and you all started, that in your practice, and you know, for people like me coming up, because you always have to give props to the people who, you know, and credit and love where you learn, how you learn. You know, those things influence me. I was in a living room with Carrie James Marshall at my friend at Dawu Bay's house, and I didn't really make that connection to Carrie. And I was talking to his wife, Cheryl Bruce, and we were just talking about art. And you know, that connection was the influence from a lot of those images I'm making were those paintings being you know, seen, and you would see them in public spaces, just hanging up there. You know, nobody knew who Carrie James Marshall was. You know, so that's art, right? That's the gift we're given. You know, we have that passport. We have that luxury to be able to tell stories. So I'm feeling that, I think, more and more now. But you all started that foundation for my generation, and now there's another, you know, generation of artists coming up doing something different.
And I think I learned from your aesthetics. I mean, I think you push the aesthetic boundaries and really help us to make good use of tools we have, make better use of tools we have by the way you see things. So I'm very appreciative of your work.
Thank you. And yeah, and it was just, again, right, what comes back, like going back to Philly, you know, a place that influenced me a lot at a young age. I was 24 when I was living there, coming back to Philly and then teaching where you know, at your temple, you know, basically the place you started for young people, like that, you know, again, it just comes in full circle. So we're very close to each other. It's a close-knit community, even though sometimes it feels far away.
I loved working in Philly. I think it was one of my favorite places to.
Yeah, Philly reminds me of Chicago too.
Yes, and Detroit. I mean, they all.
I know.
Wendy did this incredible project with Al Bustan, a Arab American cultural organization in Philadelphia that still stays with me. It's really pretty wonderful.
Yeah, I felt so. It was right when, you know, before the election, the Trump election, and it was felt so horrible, you know, and to work with Al Bustan in that situation and to be able to say, okay, what can we do? And that's, you know, so we ended up doing working with the young people, making an immigrant alphabet that wrapped
and it was a public art piece, and they extended it. It was only supposed to be there for a short amount of time, and then people said no, keep it up, and it was outdoors around the municipal service building.
Yeah, the municipal service building.
Yeah, right near City Hall. A big deal.
Yeah. No, it was great.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, I think we were I kind of jumped into this thing about social realism, and the practice of social realism, and the importance of it at one point, and it kind of fell away. And I've been really inspired by social realism, like that is where my work comes from. I believe, right? From the paintings, you know, from Charles White to Gordon Parks, Dorothea Lange, it goes on and on and on, right? But you know, and I believe that it is alive, right? I consider myself as an artist in the practice of social realism. But I was asking you, Wendy, and you started talking about it because we started kind of jumping into how the art world kind of kicked it out, and now they're coming back to it. So, what do you? I want to hear what you think.
Well, you know, back in the day, I mean, it was so lonely, for one thing. I just want to put that out, that this is so wonderful to be able to have these conversations. But Yeah, it got easier in a sense as people, as we went on, but I don't know if you feel like this, Louis, but there, as things changed and we kept thinking, oh, now people are going to understand what we're trying to say, and then it didn't happen, and then another 10 years would go by or whatever, and now it's pretty interesting because it has become something that is accepted in the art world in a way that it never was accepted before. I think, and in a way it's interesting, and I'm grateful, but I wonder what everybody means.
Yeah, I mean, and in some ways, I guess I'm kind of okay with it not being fully accepted, because accepted to me means it's commodified, and it means it's part of the capitalist system, as opposed to a tool to help improve the society. As opposed to being cultural work, to how do we make this a better place to live? How do we make communities self-determining? How do we improve democracy? I mean, that's something that is not necessarily something that is going to be. We don't want that commodified. We want that. The value of that is in its direct relationship to changing it, changing the culture.
And I also think it can be aesthetically directed without being commodified, if that makes sense. I mean, I think it's as important to push the boundaries aesthetically in this way as well as politically. I mean, they're both interesting.
Yes, I'm not an anti-aestheticist.
No, I'm not saying I'm not saying anybody is, but
No.
That's something that sort of bothers me sometimes, is that it gets sort of pigeonholed in some ways, and that's why I love looking at Carlos at your black and white Polaroid pictures, and the way that they were, that they are constructed is different, and that's important. That comes from who you are and what you're trying to say. But I think sometimes that people see things in terms of poverty, for one thing, and how it's the aesthetic that you put into it that lifts it out of what can be stereotypical. You know what I mean?
Sorry. Yeah, no, I mean, it's what we were talking about, reshaping the narrative of how we tell stories, right? How we take that narrative and make it our own, and then put it back into the world. So I think, I think this period that we're in, it is actually really challenging us, right? Because the last administration really brought out those questions, and I think having evidence of these issues that exist before, into the present moment, I think really helped show that, like, we're here, George Floyd is real. Mike Brown is real, and then all these other young people that have been in that space for years. I mean, we can talk about Detroit, right? We can, and this is nothing new, but it just it goes in waves, right? So you got to be ready for it, I guess, right? When it comes our way. How do we deal with it? I was dealing with it before, and then when it came last summer, my child was sick, so I had to take care of my child, and I was sitting at home, and my thing was, I can't be out in the streets. I got to be here, nurturing this young boy, you know, to be well. So that was a real challenge, being able to like, you know, my work was over. Like time said, hey, stop, be here, you know, and then he's good, he's doing great, but it was just that challenge that you know, witnessing all these moments in you know, but in history, but history doesn't work that way. I think we're kind of left with the aftermath, the before and the after of you know, community, and not the reaction sometimes, you know, and it's hard to accept that. You know, putting yourself in that thinking box, right, in that place to like, how do we tell the next thing for the next, you know, generation to come? How do we deal with that and address it? Because it goes away and people get distracted by, you know, there's no COVID, or there's no you know, pandemic that's like isolating everybody into the same space. And I think last year we were in that world. We're still in it. It hasn't gone away, but but that isolation really made people focus, you know. Interesting time, right? To be an artist or to reflect, right?
I'm curious, both you know, Carlos and Wendy, do you have kind of go-to places to share your work? That is, do you have, are there venues that or regular venues that you share your work and that allow you to engage with the communities that you work with?
You want to go, Wendy?
Well, I was just going to say that's one of the reasons why I'm very no, not a lot of times. I mean, and that's one of the reasons why I'm excited about, you know, making a space out of Centro Romero that is contributing in the terms of, you know, is showing, exhibiting, and teaching and whatever. But I think that's hard for me. I mean, my life has really been going from sort of places to places. I've been working in Tanzania for 10 years or 11 years now, with the university there, and so in a way that is a community for me, because we're evolving together, the professors and I, and creating this thing that's there. So I guess for me, it's the work itself is where I can do that, or how I can do that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the spaces always change, and I think that's the privilege and the luck I've had, you know, from actually going to a gallery space to you know, a film festival, or a setting where you're showing, you know, 8th graders work, to collections, you know. It's this gamut of and then obviously the online portals that we have, but I've just had that opportunity, like that kind of that luck, I guess, or I've forced it, you know, to happen as well. But you know, I remember one time I had a film at the Milwaukee Film Festival, and this woman said to me, you know, these films don't come to our community, you know, and the audience is all white, which is beautiful because they're supporting film, but also there's this connection, right, of people who would never see a film like this, outside of my community, right? So I think that's the most important part of being an artist, is being able to take, our work into different places and connect with, all kinds of folks that are interested. So yeah, man, I think Louis, the spaces change, but I know you weren't asking me which is my favorite space, but I would say is the community hub, the places created by, by people like you and Wendy, like the invitation. And sometimes you can't make all those invitations because you have to work and create and pay the bills, but sometimes they all come together and it happens, so that's a great question.
No.
How about you?
No. What about for you?
Well, I'm really conscious of trying to, and I don't succeed a lot of the time, but I'm really conscious of trying to assess what are the institutions that are there, and they may not be the usual cast of characters, and they may not be 501c3s, they may not be funded by X, Y, and Z, but what are institutions that are there that can allow for me, because I get so much out of the conversation with the work. I mean, yes, you want works to be seen by a lot of different eyeballs, on the screen, but there's something really powerful when you can actually connect with people that see a film, or you can be in conversation with folks, because I learn as much, I learn more than probably the person who's watching the film. So I'm thinking that, and I'm just thinking about this in terms of, do you know the she's a filmmaker, sort of a gallery impresario. She really was probably one of Linda Good Bryant. She created this gallery in Manhattan. Like, she was like 22 or 23. She just graduated from Spelman and decided, this is like in the 60s, that she was going to start a gallery. And she created Just Above Midtown Gallery. And folks like David Hammonds and Betty Saar, who are now whatever, all work there. But she's somebody who throughout her life has really created institutions, realizing that part of a cultural practice, one strategy in a cultural practice is either connecting yourself to an institution, or recognizing an institution, or building an institution. So I was just wondering, putting that out there.
Totally.
Yeah. I think now too, like I've been having that relationship with the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago.
And I'm thinking about people's as opposed to corporate, and I'm not.
Yeah. No. I mean, it became where, like, I just put my work in a portfolio review thing, but then the students from the city, from the place where because I went to school there, the places where my friends came to, like the only real like art school. I'm not talking about the Art Institute. I'm not like, but a place where a lot of the city kids came to, they were looking at it, and then the people in the Institute, were like, hey, can we get your work? And so that connection was made at that level. The other connections were made again in community hubs. So that it's an interesting place to also push a museum such as MOCP to ask them, the tough questions of how do they approach community, and they've really like changed that path to doing that. in the past, I feel like 4 or 5 years, you know, they're really making that connection. So I also think we have to challenge, you know, the institutes to bring that work, to think about the curators, to think about that work, and those curators come up too, you know, they change it. So there's curators that will change an institute just being in the inside. So I think that happens, it has to happen, you know, in these institutes as well. It's happening more and more. I mean, we're having, look at the platform. Where are we having this conversation?
Right.
You know, so
I started a gallery in London when I was in college. You know, and there was only one other photography gallery in England, and
wow.
you know, and that was just because, well, it's not just because, it's something I always wanted to do, but my husband at the time was working in a theater, and which was one of the first fringe theaters, and we were all squatting, and very picturesque, and you know, but it gave us all this freedom.
Right.
You know, and I made the gallery space, and we had the theater, and there was incredible productions. And
what was the name of the gallery?
The Half Moon Gallery. It still exists.
Wow.
Which is really weird too. But you know, and at that time, I just think a lot of it is things are timing. You know, of just fortunately having the opportunity to be in that time and that space, and realizing, oh, you can, yeah, let's just try this and see. So I feel like I've been really, you know, fortunate to be able to follow those things or think about them, and, you know, do them with no money. And
So the clock is there.
I know we're almost out, right?
Notes, but I want to know, what are you working on? Both of you know, Carla, what are you in the middle of?
I'm in the middle of really figuring out. It takes a while to figure things out, but I'm in the middle of figuring out how to tell these stories of environmental racism in Black and Brown communities. You know, it's to me is the forefront of obviously where you live, the landscape you live in, but also, you know, a form of violence, you know. So I'm just trying to figure that out without spewing out that, you know, that word violence. But yeah, I'm trying to figure that out. So I have a National Geographic Explorer grant, which is interesting, that they look at all types of folks, you know, from filmmakers to, you know, people like me who's work in multi-practice. So yeah, I got this grant from Geographic to explore and work and look at, you know, Black and Brown communities and talk about environmental racism. So I'm working on that.
Wow, that's great, important work. Wow.
Yeah, I'll need guidance.
I need guidance too. I'm doing something for National Geographic with 4 Freedoms.
Oh yeah, interesting. Really?
About my my community that I grew up in, and the other community that I was attached to, which was a community of heavyweight boxers that my father managed.
Wow. Where did you grow up, Wendy?
I was born in Detroit, and then we moved to Grosse Pointe.
Wow.
And Brother Louis, what's up? Tell us, what are you working on?
So I'm behind, but I've been working on this documentary about Tony Cade Bambara, and it's really a primer on how one uses culture as a way of organizing communities. So it's like various people telling stories about Tony, but they're really lessons on cultural organizing as a way of strengthening communities. So I thought I was kind of near finished shooting, but I need a little bit more to do. And there's a wonderful editor, Monica Enriquez, who I've been working with, and it will be done sooner rather than later. Yeah.
And what is
Wish you luck.
What are the communities that you're working in?
With that film or with
the film, sorry.
What?
With the film.
With the film.
With Tony. So Tony's particular focus was, I would say, African diasporic communities, women, down-pressed people broadly, yeah. So those are all part of the audience that I hope will that the film is for, and that will be useful to them, to us, I should say.
Yes.
So
well, thank you. It was just a real privilege being here.
Yeah, it was great.
And yeah, so we're gonna sign off for the people who. Thank you for your time, for tuning in and being with us.
Yeah, thank you.